Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are previewing the WGC FedEx St Jude Invitational, the first leg of the 2023 FedEx Cup Playoffs, which is taking place this week at TPC Southwind at Memphis, Tennessee. We are going to break down the course, and then we are going to give the key stats that matter at this course, as well as some comp courses. And then we are going to try to find the golfers who are going to win us some money in DFS betting and one and done this week. It is a full comprehensive preview. You will not find a more comprehensive preview in one podcast than this one. Now, before we get started with that, though, do have a few things to talk about. So first, we got to attend the Wyndham Championship last week. I mentioned on the podcast on Monday that it's about 20 minutes from my front door and that I've driven through the course numerous times and been to the event before. And I didn't know at the time that I was going to end up going. My friend Zach, who you guys have heard on this podcast talk US Open with me, invited me. He had tickets. And so, we had general passes. We walked the course, got to walk with Hideki's group for a little bit, got to walk with Webb Simpson and Siwoo Kim's group for a little bit. Siwoo Kim actually acknowledged me, which was pretty cool. And then got to follow JT and Shane Lowry's group in the afternoon on Friday, which was an absolute blast. If you have a chance to go to a PGA Tour event, I highly recommend doing it. It's a really fun experience the way that they do things now. And I could go for a whole episode on that experience, but I'm not going to because this one is for the FedEx St Jude. But I did want to mention that if you were following me on Twitter, I was tweeting a lot about being there. Also, this being the first week of the FedEx Cup Playoffs, this is the last week to participate in Underdog's Pup Cup, which is their best ball draft tournament for the FedEx Cup Playoffs. I have recorded a video talking about draft strategy as well as doing a live draft for the Pup Cup. Link is going to be in the description. I highly recommend checking that out if you plan on playing in Underdog's Pup Cup. It should be a pretty fun contest. I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to do another draft or two this week. And lastly, we got one right on the Live Tour. We were all over Bryson DeChambeau last week, and he had a round on Sunday. I don't care if it's at, any golf course against any competition. A 58 is darn impressive. And so way to have a round, Bryson. Good for you for getting that first victory on Live. We will be previewing Live Bedminster later this week. So if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll be notified when new episodes drop, and you will get the drop on that episode. And hopefully we can identify ourselves another winner on the Live Tour. All right, so that does it for the intro. We're going to go ahead and start our preview of the FedEx St Jude. All right, so let's go ahead and start by talking about the course. So the FedEx St Jude is played at TPC Southwind, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. It plays as a par 70 and a little over 7,200 yards. So it is not a long golf course by any stretch of the imagination, but it is one that is generally a fairly tough test for players on the PGA Tour. This is not an easy golf course. This is not a birdie fest. Now, there's a little bit of weird event history here. Because this is the first leg of the FedEx Cup Playoffs, it tends to vary in some places where you try to look up course history. It might show course history at the Northern Trust, which formerly was the first event of the FedEx Cup Playoffs. So if you're looking at any course history that says that Tony Finau won this event in 2021, that is from the Northern Trust, and you can disregard that. This event took over the first leg of the FedEx Cup Playoffs last year. So the first time that the FedEx St Jude was at this spot on the schedule was in the 2022 season, and that event was won by Will Zalatoris. Now, I do think it is worth noting that, this course has been in play on the PGA Tour since about 1990. So there is good actionable course history here. Just be careful when looking it up, like I just advised. Now, water does come into play on 11 holes here. It does play as, kind of a run-of-the-mill TPC layout where, you've got firm and fast fairways, firm and fast greens. Everything is very well manicured. Everything's in pristine condition, and you've got a lot of water hazards. Now, there's a few holes here at this course where driver is not really necessary. There's a lot of holes where there's kind of a hazard or, like a dog leg or just something that doesn't allow you to drive the ball but so far. And almost all of these holes will feature approaches that are about 125 to 150 yards. And really all the approaches here at this course are going to be in the 125 to 200 yard range. So there's not a whole lot of super duper long approaches here at this course, but there's also not a whole lot of partial shots and flip wedges either. Now, in terms of agronomy, the TPC Southwind does have zoysia grass fairways, which are some of the narrowest on tour. It is going to be super important to keep it in the fairway this week and keep it out of the trees and keep it out of the rough. The rough is generally pretty penal. Now, the greens. are some of the smallest on tour. In fact, they're the third smallest greens on tour on average, and they are champion Bermuda grass. They're going to play very firm and very fast. What this generally allows when you have small greens that are also fast greens, it allows players who are good putters to gain more strokes putting, because pretty much every hole they're going to have a putt that for them is a makeable putt, and they're going to end up making some. So the formula for winning here has been to have just an elite ball striking week and try to combine that with a really good putting week. Generally, the guys who have scored well here and played well here in any given year have been guys that have had really good ball striking weeks and usually paired it with really good putter weeks. In fact, if you were just to look at the winners of this event, first when it was formerly the St. Jude Classic, you've got Daniel Berger, you've got Dustin Johnson, and then after that, you've got Brooks Koepka, Justin Thomas, and Abraham Answer, and last year, Will Zalatoris. It's just a lot of guys who are really good at ball striking and then just happen to have that 1 week where the putter gets hot. Like we talked about Will Zalatoris a lot last season at the start of this year. He's an elite level iron player. And if the putter is working, that is when he's going to be able to win golf tournaments. Well, guess what? That was the formula that he followed last season. Now, again, when you look at the winners, it's guys who followed that formula. And so when you kind of look at course history here, I'm looking at last year's event here in the database on rickrungood.com. You look at how guys gained strokes on their path to their victory. A lot of the guys that were near the top of the leaderboard gained strokes on approach. In fact, a lot of them gained over 1 stroke on approach per round. And most of them, like a majority of the strokes that they gained for the event, were strokes gained on approach. And again, you see the kind of the same pattern here. Most of them combine that with a good putting week. Kind of the outliers are Adam Scott, who had a negative week on approach, but was the best putter in the field. Or you had Trey Mullinax, who had one of the best weeks on approach, but lost slightly in the putting categories. So that's going to be kind of the formula this week. If you want to see course history here in whole instead of just last year's event, the best players at TPC Southwind that are in this field have been Sepp Straka, even though his only appearance was a playoff loss last season. And then you've got Harris English, Lee Hodges, Tom Kim, Sahith Theegala. Hodges, Kim, and Theegala have also only played this event 1 time. And after that, you've got Denny McCarthy, Rory McIlroy, Sam Burns, Hideki Matsuyama, Colin Morikawa, and John Rahm. Again, the fact that you've got guys that have only played once here near the top of this board shows that course history here is not super sticky. If you can turn in 1 good performance, you can end up near the top of this board. And so definitely I would rather go with guys who have a track record of, a statistical profile that I care about as opposed to any kind of course history that I care about. Now, in terms of comp courses, I have picked 3 comp courses for TPC Southwind. And they all kind of have a common trend. They all feature Bermuda greens. They all, generally play pretty firm and fast, and they all have water hazards running about. It's no coincidence that all 3 of these courses happen to be in the state of Florida. Innisbrook Resort, home of the Valspar Championship, PGA National, home of the Honda Classic, and TPC Sawgrass, home of the Players Championship. Those are my 3 comp courses this week. I think that TPC Twin Cities is a little bit of a comp as well, but that one generally plays a little longer, a little more water, and it's bent grass greens. So I don't think the comparison there is a pure 1-to-1. Now, at those 3 comp courses, the best players in this field have been Eric Cole, Tommy Fleetwood, Scotty Scheffler, Hideki Matsuyama, and Victor Hovland in your top 5, with Sungjae Im, Sam Burns, Davis Riley, Sepp Straka, and Justin Rose rounding out the top 10. Now, thinking about all the key stats that we have this week, I went ahead and built out a model using the custom model tool on rickrungood.com. I used strokes gained tee to green. I used strokes gained putting Bermuda. I used all of the approach buckets. I used course history here at TPC Southwind. I used good drive percentage, and then I used a lot of approach stats after that. And like I said, approach this week is going to be kind of the most important thing. And I do think that being able to putt on Bermuda is going to be important as well. You're not going to win this tournament if you don't have a positive putting week. So at the end of the day, my model popped out this top 10. John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, no surprise there. Russell Henley, Tom Kim, Colin Morikawa, Lucas Glover, Hideki Matsuyama, Andrew Putnam, Patrick Cantlay, and then Rory McIlroy sitting at 10, which is kind of a little bit down further than I would have hoped, considering his price tag and considering his history in the FedEx Cup playoffs. All right, so that is enough for breaking down the course. Let's go ahead and see if we can zero in on some guys that might give us some winning upside this week to win this golf. All right, so looking at the board here, looking at the DraftKings pricing this week, I was kind of surprised that they built out the pricing this way this week. When I first opened this up and saw that Scottie Scheffler was at $12,100, I really thought that they were going to go back to their, kind of the format they had for the Open Championship, where the bare minimum was $5,500 as opposed to $6,000, but that was not the case this week. So this week, we have got a no-cut event with only 70 players, and it's going to be pretty much a week where if you're playing DFS, you're going to want to have the winner in your lineup if you're going to want to win any money this week, because pretty much everybody's getting a 6-for-6 lineup. So you're going to have to find some way to make your 6-for-6 lineup better than everybody else's. And also keep in mind that with it being a limited field, everybody is playing almost 10% of the field. So you're going to have to find a way to, be a little bit different in terms of finding guys with less ownership as well if you're playing on DFS. If you're betting, it's all about finding the winner. So I think that it's very likely that the winner of this tournament ends up coming from the top of the board. When you look at the FedEx Cup playoffs in recent history at the FedEx Cup playoff events, the winners have been the big dogs. Last year, you had Rory McIlroy, Patrick Cantlay, Will Zalatoris win the 3 playoff events. The year before, the 2021 Tour Championship, you had Cantlay, and then Tony Finau winning the Northern Trust. The year before that, it was DJ, Rahm, DJ winning the 3 playoff events. So, the FedEx Cup playoff events are where the best golfers in the world shine, and the courses are set up so that way the best golfers in the world can shine. Now, on DraftKings, if we were trying to determine a way for us to kind of narrow down which guy we want at the top, let's go ahead and take a look at the stats for the big 3. So Scottie Scheffler is the top price guy on the board. It is not surprising. Scottie Scheffler is the best tee to green player in the world. Note my use of the words tee to green, because once he gets on the green, he's not great. He's actually one of the worst putters in the field statistically. But the good news is this. He actually is better at putting on Bermuda grass than any other surface, which isn't saying a whole lot because his other surfaces have been pretty crappy. But what it means that is if he can keep up his ball striking weeks with, kind of just a not terrible putting week, he can give a really good finish here at this event. The Open Championship, where he lost almost 5 strokes putting, was his worst finish in almost a calendar year. And so I definitely think that he's on track to bounce back here at this event. Last year, though, he did miss the cut here at TPC Southwind. And that was kind of a strange miscut. He kind of lost all of his strokes on the green. And so I kind of think that he will be able to bounce back from that. I have no problem paying up for Scheffler this week. Now, I would probably prefer to play Rory McIlroy, though. If you look at Rory McIlroy's stats, his ball striking numbers have been just as good, if not better, than Scottie Scheffler in the last 2 months. And he has actually gained strokes putting in each of his last 8 events, which the same cannot be said for Scottie Scheffler. And we also know that Rory always shows up in the FedEx Cup playoffs. This is his time to shine, and so I definitely think that this could be another good spot to play Rory at. Like Scheffler, Rory McIlroy also missed the cut here last year, but he also has some really good finishes here at TPC Southwind. He was T12 in 2021, T4 in 2019, and T7 all the way back in 2012, and he has shown the ability to gain strokes in every category here at this course. He just hasn't really put it all together for one weekend here at this course. And so I definitely think that there's a chance that this weekend could be that weekend for Rory McIlroy. Next up, the last of the big 3 is Jon Rahm, who is a guy who, I'll be honest, was a kind of a fade for me at the Open Championship. I did not play a lot of him in DraftKings because I just was not a believer of his form coming in. He was not as good of a ball striker as Rory or Scottie, and he was priced up there with Rory or Scottie. And I just really wasn't going to pay for him for that. And plus, I still think he's in a little bit of a post-Masters lull. Well, I kind of think that Rahm's back out of that lull with that T2 finish at the Open Championship where he gained strokes in every single category. And he also has a pretty good history here at TPC Southwind. He's got a 7th, a 52nd, and a 5th to his name, where he has been elite pretty much in every way here at this course. Last year, he gained 7 strokes in the ball striking categories and was just barely a negative with the putter. And you got to feel like if he gained strokes with the putter, he probably would have ended up winning that event. So I definitely think that this is a good spot for Jon Rahm. When you think about courses that set up well for Jon Rahm, It's courses where you have a lot of long irons in your hand or a lot of long approaches in your hand. And while that's not going to be the case on every hole here, there definitely are a few holes where he can separate himself with his long iron play and take advantage of that to kind of separate himself from the pack. Now, if you're looking to, play a guy from near the top that's not one of the big three, may I recommend Viktor Hovland. So Viktor Hovland has been absolutely elite in the ball striking categories since pretty much the start of this calendar year. He hasn't had a single tournament where he's lost strokes ball striking since January 1st. In fact, he hasn't finished worse than 59th in a tournament since January 1st, and in that event, he lost 7 strokes putting. Now, his most recent showing was at Royal Liverpool, where he gained 9 strokes ball striking. Like Viktor Hovland tended does, he lost multiple strokes around the green, and that was kind of what separated him from being in the top group on Sunday. So, what is his history like here at TPC Southwind? Well, he's made the cut in all 3 appearances, and he hasn't chipped the ball well. He generally doesn't, but he's been pretty good off the tee and pretty good on approach. So if you're going to end up fading the top 3 and you want to get a little leverage by doing so, I recommend going down to Viktor Hovland at 10,200 on DraftKings. Now, thinking about what are the keys to success this week, we know that it's going to be approach and putting, right? Approach and putting. So if you look just here at the total strokes gain numbers, who are some guys whose approach plus putting puts them in pretty good territory? Well, in the 9K range on DraftKings, Tyrrell Hatton and Ricky Fowler are both great guys on approach and great guys with the putter. And so I definitely think if you're playing the type of course that we've got this week, those will be 2 guys that you should be interested in. I also think that Jordan Spieth is going to be kind of like the ownership leverage play of, this weekend with, kind of the fact that he burned a lot of people at the Scottish Open. He was not very high owned at the Open Championship, and he came in 23rd. And then his course history here at this event has been hit or miss. He's got 2 12th place finishes as well as a missed cut. So I think he's going to be the guy that gets overlooked this week. If you're an ownership guy, a pivot play guy, Jordan Spieth should be a guy you should get into your lineups this week. Now, my 2 favorites in the 9K range personally are going to be Tommy Fleetwood and Colin Morikawa. Tony Fleetwood, like we talked about with Viktor Hovland, has just been really, really good in the ball striking categories. And he's really only been bad in the ball striking categories twice, and those were his 2 missed cuts. Other than that, he's been pretty elite in them. Now, he's been really elite lately with 6 strokes in the ball striking at Royal Liverpool and 12 strokes in the ball striking at Los Angeles Country Club. And Tommy Fleetwood has shown us the ability to have spike weeks with the putter like he did when he gained 9 strokes putting at the RBC Canadian Open. And his history at this course is pretty good. He's got a 4th, a 35th, and a 46th. Tommy Fleetwood, when he does finally win on the PGA Tour, it's not going to be at a course that is bomb and gouge. It's going to be at a course where you can play positional golf, where you can be really good on approach, and where, up and down, getting around the green and having good chips is going to be pretty important as well. And I think this course lines up pretty good with his skill set. I really do like Tommy Fleetwood this week. Now, my other favorite play in the 9K range is Colin Morikawa. So when you think about what we talked about, the formula was approach and putting. Well, you've got a guy who has very low floors and high ceilings in both of those categories. So Colin Morikawa, in his last 5 events, has gained 5 strokes or more on approach in 3 of them. He's also lost strokes on approach in the other 2. So, you've got, kind of peaks and valleys with that approach from Morikawa. His putter is also the same. In his last 5, he's gained over 2.5 strokes in 2 of them. He also lost over 1.5 strokes in 1 of them. So why not go with a guy like Morikawa who can get hot in the 2 categories that matter the most? His history here is also pretty good. He's never finished worse than 26th, and he has shown the ability to gain strokes in every category. And last year, he did gain strokes in every category and finished in 5th place in this tournament. So Colin Morikawa, I really do think it sets up well for him. We know that Morikawa is not one of the longest guys off the tee in the field, and this is a course that's not going to punish you for being short with the driver in your hand. All right, now next up is the 8K range. So Jason Day and Max Homa are 2 other guys that I think are going to be pretty lowly owned. If you're an ownership guy, go for it. I'm probably not going to. They did not rate out very well in my model, and so I'm kind of just going to pass on them for this week. Tony Finau, I'm willing to buy back in on the bounce back. he has a pretty mixed history here, but he has shown a high ceiling with a 5th place finish here last year. And he came in 7th at the 3M Open. I was really concerned about his game heading into that event, but the good showing there does give me a little faith that he can bounce back and play well in this one. Matt Fitzpatrick is a guy who has probably one of the best course histories in this event. He's had 3 top 6 finishes in his last 4 appearances, and he's another guy like Hatton and Fowler that I mentioned earlier, whose approach plus putting sets up pretty good. Now, I do want to go ahead and talk about a few of my favorite guys in the 8K range, the first of which is Wyndham Clark. So Wyndham Clark had his worst finish in a while at the Open Championship, where he came in 33rd. And if you look at where he lost strokes at, it was with the putter, and then it was a little bit on approach. That approach number is largely because he did hit one shot OB, where I think it significantly tossed him and ended up with a big number. So I'm kind of willing to forgive that. I'm also kind of willing to forgive the poor putting, over there across the pond on a completely different kind of grass. Now, his one start here was a 28th place finish last year. And, that's not on paper super encouraging, but when you look at the stats, I actually think it is. He gained 5 strokes putting here last year and was honestly pretty terrible on approach. He lost over 3 strokes on approach. That is not what Wyndham Clark does in 2023. Wyndham Clark's been a great approach player. So if he can keep up his approach play that he's had this season with the putting that he showed here last year and is able to do that on the same weekend, this could end up being another win for Wyndham Clark. Next up is Cameron Young, who is another one of my favorite plays in the 8K range this week. So Cameron Young is a guy who is one of the longest hitters on the PGA Tour. That's kind of his thing. Is that something that's going to be a massive advantage this week? No, but he is also fairly accurate with the driver. He's just really good with a driver in his hand, and him being one of the longer players on the PGA Tour means that he's going to be hitting shorter clubs into these small greens, which is a big advantage to have when the greens play firm and fast. He did miss the cut at the 3M Open in his last appearance, but I'm just really not super worried about that. I just really hope he's able to get back to the ball striking numbers that he exhibited earlier in the month of June, and I think this could be a pretty good place to do that. Last year when he played this event, I do believe it was last year when he played this event. He came in 31st place and he lost 5 strokes putting, but he gained 9 strokes in the ball striking category. So maybe second time around at this event, he's able to play these greens just a little bit better. And if he keeps that same ball striking, he's surely to have a good finish here at TPC Southwind. Last play in the 8K range that I do like is going to be Sam Burns. So Sam Burns was a guy that I liked heading into the Wyndham Championship, and I like even more heading into this week. He gained strokes in every category at the Wyndham last week except for off the tee, which is generally something that he's pretty good at. And so I kind of think that he's going to bounce back with the driver, but if he can keep up the same play with his approach and with his putting, I do think he's going to be in very good shape. We know that he's nicknamed Bermuda Burns because Bermuda grass is one of his best putting surfaces. And so that also manifested itself here at this course back in 2021, where he was a loser in a playoff to Abraham Ancer. So I really like the fact that you're getting a guy on a good track with good form coming in. I know I'm not the only guy in the industry who's going to be mentioning Sam Burns this week, so if you play him in DFS formats, just know he's going to come with a lot of high ownership. He's probably going to be one of the highest owned golfers on the slate. Now, another guy that I'm probably going to be fading this week that I just want to go out of my way to get this out there is Brian Harman, coming off of his Open Championship win. He has not teed it up since then, and I kind of think that that's a little bit of an emotional roller coaster to go on. And I also think that the way he won that Open, which was just by making every single putt, is not really a sustainable way to keep winning golf tournaments. So I'm kind of willing to back off on Brian Harman this week and hope that a lot of other people play him and he doesn't pay off that price tag of $8,300 on DraftKings. Now, the 7K range is very intriguing this week because if you want to pay up for one of the big dogs, you are going to have to back end it with some guys from this 7K range. So, like the formula that we talked about earlier, is there anybody who just shows up with the whole approach plus putting formula? Well, in this range, your nominee for that would be Justin Rose and Emiliano Grillo. But they are actually not my 2 favorite plays in this range. I do have a few favorites in this range. First of which is going to be Russell Henley. So if I'm being totally honest, I think Russell Henley kind of got unlucky at the Wyndham last week. He had just a few very unlucky rolls of the ball into kind of unfortunate landing zones on the back 9 on Sunday. And it's very possible that if he just plays, I don't know, if his shots land in a slightly different spot, he might have been holding that trophy on Sunday night as opposed to Lucas Glover. But what I do like is the fact that he is continuing to be really good in the ball striking categories when he's stateside. His worst round in the ball striking was at Royal Liverpool, so I'm kind of willing to forgive that because he's a very American golfer, right? So I think if he's able to get back to that same ball striking and show the same, level of putting that he did at the Wyndham, I think he's going to be in very good shape. His history here at this event is a bit of a mixed bag. He's got 2 top 30s and also 3 missed cuts. So I'm hoping that Russell Henley is going to keep his recent form going and roll it right into a good finish here at TPC Southwind. Another one of my favorite plays this week is Tom Kim. So if I mentioned, if you remember me mentioning in the Open, approach plus putting, who's a guy who can get really, really hot in both of those categories? Well, that's Tom Kim. And if you look at what he's done recently, he's shown us tournaments where he has gotten really hot on approach and gotten really hot putting. When he was T8 at the U.S. Open, 7 strokes on approach, 3 strokes putting. T6 at the Scottish Open, 4.5 strokes on approach, 4 strokes putting. At Royal Liverpool, T2, 2.5 strokes on approach, 7.5 strokes putting. He has the ability to just go nuclear in these 2 categories that matter so much. He played this event last year and came in 13th place, gained 5 strokes on approach, lost 1 stroke putting. If he's just able to turn around that putting and, turn it into maybe gaining 2 strokes instead of losing 1, he could very well be winning his second event of the season. Yeah, second event of the season because he did win the Shriners back last October. So I definitely think this is a really, really good fit for Tom Kim, and he is one of my absolute favorite plays this week. Now, the rest of the 7K range, I really do like Denny McCarthy. The missed cut at the Wyndham, I don't know, man. He was still Denny McCarthy, right? He was still elite with the putter in his hand at the greens at the Wyndham Championship. It was just he was terrible on approach. And he was terrible on approach at the Open Championship. But he hasn't been terrible on approach for pretty much any stretch in this year 2023. So I'm hoping that he can kind of just snap out of that stretch and continue to be the great putting Denny McCarthy that we know he is. At this course, he's had a pretty good run. He has 2 top 20 finishes in his 2 appearances here. He's gained over 3 strokes putting, and he's gained an approach in both appearances. So I do think that this sets up pretty well for Denny McCarthy. Another guy that is not one of the longest hitters off the tee on tour, and he's not going to be boxed out of playing well at this course because of his lack of distance. I really do like Denny McCarthy this week, and I'm hoping that he's able to bounce back, and I'm also hoping that we're going to catch him at low ownership because he's burned a lot of people in each of the last 2 tournaments. Now, heading further down the board, down into the kind of the bottom of the 7K range. Lucas Glover, we mentioned, won the Wyndham last week, and he's been just great on approach. And he's been kind of inconsistent with the putter, but he's really found it in the last few weeks. I kind of don't like playing guys right off of wins on DraftKings just because I don't really think that, if they won their tournament in an unsustainable way, it's not likely to happen twice in a row. So I'm kind of willing to pass on Lucas Glover this week. But a guy I do want to mention is JT Poston, who came in 7th at the Wyndham. And he's just been on a really good run of golf in, kind of the last 2 months, has 3 top 30 finishes at this event. I think everything's setting up well for JT Poston this week. But there are 2 plays at the bottom of the 7K range that I do want to point out, the first of which is Steven Jaeger. So Steven Jaeger, over the summer, has been having some really good run, right? He's got 5 straight top 35 finishes dating back to the start of July. So with Steven Jaeger, his Achilles heel is his putter, right? He can just absolutely putt himself out of a tournament. Well, he didn't do that at Sedgefield, where he gained almost 3 strokes putting. And Sedgefield, Bermuda greens, like what we're going to be seeing here at TPC Southwind. And so if you look at his history here, he missed the cut way back in 2018. I believe he was primarily a Korn Ferry Tour player then. But last year, Jaeger made the cut here and was not great in the ball striking categories, but did gain strokes with the putter. What we've been seeing out of Steven Jaeger so far this year, I think he's got his ball striking really turned around. And if he can happen to gain strokes with the putter, he can give you a really good finish this week. Last up in the 7K range is Cam Davis, who is a long hitter who plays well at short golf courses for whatever reason. And he did it again last week at Sedgefield Country Club with a T7 at the Wyndham. He's gained strokes in every category in back-to-back weeks, which is really something that I could not find on his card dating back to ever. And he also has a pretty solid history here at this event. He's appeared in it twice, made the cut both times. Well, actually, the WGC was a no-cut event, and he came in 60th, but so ignore that one. But he was 13th here last year, gaining strokes in every category, including 3 strokes with the putter. So I think everything is trending in the right direction for Cam Davis at a course that not only suits his game well, but he also has good history at. So I'm kind of buying in on Cam Davis this week. He's another one of my favorite plays in DFS here this week. Now, looking in the 6K range, it is a better 6K range than most weeks because of the limited field. Oh, before I totally dive into the 6K range, Harris English probably has the best course history here out of anybody. He won this event all the way back in 2013, has a number of other good finishes. So, good course history guy for Harris English. I think this course clearly fits his skill set, and he's only $7,000 on DraftKings. Now, diving into the 6K range, Eric Cole is a guy who popped up at all of my comp courses. He has not played at this golf course, but he does have 2 recent top 30 finishes. He is a really good approach player. He is a really good putter. The driver concerns me a little bit because he's not long or accurate with it, but if he's able to keep it in play off the tee and just not bleed strokes with the driver, I do think everything else sets up pretty well for his game. Alex Smalley really let me down last week because I was all over him at the Wyndham, but we do know that with him being a North Carolina guy, he's familiar with putting on Bermuda greens, and if his approach play that he's shown in the last 2 calendar months is able to continue, not the approach play that he showed at the Wyndham last week, I do think this could be a pretty good week for him. He did miss the cut in his one appearance here last year. Now, looking at the rest of the 6K range, who are some guys that we can just find for the whole approach plus putting formula? So Mark Hubbard would be a nominee for approach plus putting. Lee Hodges is not a bad nominee for that as well. Lee Hodges won at the 3M Open at TPC Twin Cities 2 weeks ago. He was also 13th here in this event last year. And then is there anybody else that stands out approach plus putting? Adam Schenk would be another guy, as well as Nick Taylor would be another guy. Now, there are 2 guys that I want to highlight, though. Oh, and Sam Ryder would be the last guy. Sam Ryder, pretty good approach plus putting. So there are 2 guys in the 6K range that I want to go out of my way to highlight, though. The first of which is J.J. Spawn. So J.J. Spawn is another guy that, like Steven Yeager, his putter is his Achilles heel. He is absolutely terrible with it. And last year when he, played this tournament for the first time, he came in 42nd, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. If I'm not mistaken, he was in the final pairing on Saturday and just kind of gave it all away on the weekend and just played terrible. Well, I think he's actually playing better golf right now than he was this time last year. He just has to not, kill his tournament with the putter, and I think he can give you a pretty good week. So I think he's definitely kind of a high-risk, high-reward guy, but in an event where it's top 70 players, no cut, even if he comes in 65th place, that's not going to totally kill you for a guy who's only $6,600 on DraftKings. The last guy I want to highlight, who is my preferred play in the 6K range, is going to be Andrew Putnam. So we talked about the formula approach plus putting. This is a guy who is good in both of those categories, generally speaking. He's gained over 3 strokes on approach in 3 straight events. He's shown the ability to have spike weeks with the putter. Generally, when Andrew Putnam's playing well, it's approach and his putter that is locked in. And for a guy in the 6K range, he has awfully good history here at this event. He missed the cut way back in 2015, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the 3 top 25 finishes that he's had in the last 5 years, with a 2nd, a 24th, and a 5th place finish. I just really like the combination of course fit and course history that you're getting from a guy who's only $6,400 on DraftKings this week. All right, so that does it for all of the golfer profiles. So let's go ahead and talk some one and done. So for one and done this week, your one and done contest should only have 2 weeks left. If your one and done's doing the Tour Championship, it's doing it wrong. I hate to break it to you. I hope your one and done is not doing the Tour Championship. So basically, you need to plan out who you're going to use each of the next 2 weeks. And, if it means looking at the FedEx Cup standings and making sure that you have 2 guys that are going to be firmly in the top 50, then you can go ahead and do that. But I think that it's very important to go ahead and figure out who you're using this week and next week this week. Right? Like, go ahead and get your plan in place this week. That way you can go out and execute it and not have to put a whole lot of thought or overthink it next week. I also think it's super important to play your position. If you know who is left by the people that are in front of you, that will kind of allow you to anticipate who they are going to end up playing and who you should play to end up gaining leverage on them. If you're in a position where you're in the money, then just go ahead and play the two best golfers you have left. If you're not in the money or way back and you need to try to make up ground, then get a little different, play a little bit of guys who, not a whole lot of people would think about, so that way you can get some leverage on them, because this is an elevated event. This is a big purse. You can get yourself pretty much $3 million in one and done if you're able to pick the winner this week. So who to pick? Well, I can tell you from my personal one and dones, there is one and done where I have left Sam Burns and Jon Rahm. In my other one and done, I have Xander Schauffele and Scottie Scheffler. So in both of these, what I'm doing is I'm saving Rahm and Scheffler for the BMW Championship. Knowing what I know about that course, it's a very U.S. Open type setup where it's going to be pretty wide, pretty thick rough, and very fast greens. Who do I like there? Guys who play well at U.S. Open. So Scottie Scheffler and Jon Rahm it is for that week, which leaves me this week with a guy that I like a whole lot in Sam Burns and Xander Schauffele, who's a guy that I never really just pinned down a particular week to play Xander Schauffele. There's not one course that stands out as a great fit for Xander. So I kind of just ended up kind of accidentally saving him for this event, which is totally fine by me. In terms of like my preferred pick, if you could pick anybody, obviously, you'd want to pick one of the big three. If you don't have the big three available, I think Victor Hovland is a great choice. I think Hatton and Fowler are great choices. I think that Fleetwood and Morikawa make for great choices also. If you've been pretty aggressive in your one and done selections, maybe you have left Wyndham Clark or Sam Burns or a Russell Henley or a Tom Kim. I think those are probably guys that are a little bit further down the board that I would still be willing to go with also. But like I said, have your strategy in mind, play your position, pick your two guys for the next 2 weeks this week, and it'll help make your life a whole lot easier next week if you're able to put in a little bit of research and nail the pick this week. All right, that does it for the FedEx St. Jude 2023 preview. We talked about, the course itself. We talked about guys we want to target for DFS and betting, and we talked one and done. Hopefully I was able to give you guys some information that will help you make some money this week, whatever format you're playing here at the FedEx St. Jude Invitational. It's the first leg of the FedEx Cup Playoffs. We will be back next week to talk the BMW Championship. We'll also be back later this week to talk about Live Bedminster, and we're also recording some season-long fantasy football content as well as college football content as well. So if you like what you saw in this episode, please subscribe to be notified when those dropped. Check out the episode on Underdog's Pup Cup Draft. Link is in the description to that one. Other than that, thank you guys for watching or listening. Best of luck to you this week, and I will see you next time.